Over the years, the fantastical scenarios regarding the Pentagon on September the 11th, 2001, has been kept alive by those who wish to profit or maintain an audience in hopes of either manipulating the public at large or knowingly lying for nefarious reasons. Nevertheless, these people who claim to be truthers are nothing more than liars, and most who pertain to the 9/11 truth movements are victims of said liars. These people will make the statement that American Airlines 77 didn't impact to the west wall of the Pentagon, but rather it was a drone outfitted to be an American Airlines 7757 jet, or that it was a fancy large-scale hologram, or that it was a missile shot by a large distance from the Atlantic by a naval warship, which is unnamed and unseen, or that a drone had flown over the Pentagon and hidden explosives are what caused the whole damage to the west wall. These people who propagate these scenarios are people who hide behind the transparent veils of YouTube or blogs where they cannot be challenged out in the open by those who can easily dismiss their claims. People like Rebekah Roth, Christopher Bollyn, the Loose Change Crew, CIT Team, Craig McKee, Barbara Honneger, Jim Fetzer, Ace Baker, Judy Wood, Pals for 9/11 Truth, Alex Jones, and many more. In this video, I will detail the actual historical events leading up to the impact of the Pentagon by American Airlines Flight 77. It's also going to dismiss entirely the notion of missiles, flyovers, and holograms, which not a single eyewitness ever saw. Now, I'm not defending the official government narrative of what happened on 9/11. In fact, I'm complete opposite of their views regarding the issue. But the basics of 9/11 are exactly how it happened, with much more that didn't happen, which was never regarded as important enough to have taken into consideration of the 9/11 official final report. I will also bring up the actual conspiracies regarding the Pentagon, which have gone completely ignored by these charlatans who propagate these outlandish claims that in turn destroy the actual conspiracy regarding Flight 77. Here is our first actual conspiracy regarding the 9/11 Pentagon issue. At approximately 8:15 p.m., Dulles security guards Eric Gill and Nicholas De Silva are standing post by the door which leads directly to the tarmac where the planes are being prepped for the following day's travels. Gill notices 5 Arab males. 3 of them are dressed as United Airlines ramp workers, who also have passes which allow them to get through the tarmac door. Gill also notices that the 3 dressed as ramp workers' uniforms are filthy and quite unkempt. The other 2 men dressed as civilians do not have passes. Gill prevents these 2 without passes from entering the secure area and realizes that he does not recognize the other 3. The men tell Gill to fuck off and that they are very important people. But Gill still refuses to let the 2 without passes to enter, and eventually all 5 men retreat. Gill goes off duty at 10 p.m. and his supervisor will comment after 9/11. If somebody wanted access to the aircraft, say to plant weapons, it would have been easy for the group Eric saw to come back after he got off duty and simply use the ID cards that they had to activate the electronic lock and slip through. The very next day, Gill was shopping with his family and heard what was happening over the radio. He took his family home and raced back to work. While he entered Dulles, he notices numerous agents from the FBI interviewing many employees. Gill's supervisor took Gill into a room where he tells the FBI his story, but the FBI fails to show him a video it had found of the hijackers passing through security checkpoints on 9/11, even though it was shown to all his other colleagues. 2 days later, the FBI return and show him poor quality photocopy pictures of the hijackers. Gill identifies 2 of them as Nawaf al-Hazmi and Marwan al-Shehi. The FBI, however, loses interest in Gill because Marwan al-Shehi is said to have been the pilot aboard United Airlines Flight 175, which crashes into the South Tower, a flight out of Logan Airport. The FBI also obtained video of the two of the hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Salim al-Hazmi, at Dulles on the day Eric Gould claims he saw Nawaf al-Hazmi and Marwan al-Shehi. But they don't show him this video, and this would not be publicly mentioned until 2008. Susan and Joe Trento, who broke this story, will also pen a book called Unsafe at Any Altitude. I will link below the interview with Eric Gill explaining his experience the evening of September 10th into the notifications below. Here is a short clip of the Trentos documentary, Unsafe at Any Altitude, of Eric Gill explaining what happened.
On the evening of September 10th, 2001, at Dulles International Airport, the rush was over. Argonne-Bright security employee Eric Gill had just returned to supervising the West checkpoint. He saw something strange. Gill, a Pakistani man who fled to the U.S. to escape religious persecution, did not want his face shown.
I saw about 5 Middle Eastern people. They were walking through the side door we have at West Checkpoint, which is accessed by only few restricted people. I noticed that 3 of them were wearing a uniform and IDs. 2 other guys who were not wearing a uniform and had no IDs, and they were trying to escort these 2 guys through there. As soon as they walked inside the checkpoint, they just stopped there and started watching around. That made me suspicious.
Gill's suspicions were well placed. The men, dressed in United Airlines ground workers' uniforms, wanted access to a door that led to the concourse and parked planes. The men tried to use one electronic badge to swipe through. Gill stopped them.
They didn't like it, and he abused me, and he said, "F off. We are people you don't know. You should be allowed to go through here, but you make your own rules." And he just walked out with it.
Eric Gill and other witnesses took no further action, but the Middle Eastern men were not through. Gill would later identify 2 of the men as the Al-Qaeda hijackers of a plane from Boston, as well as American Airlines Flight 77 out of Dulles.
On September 10, 2001, Hani Hanjour, Khalid al-Mihdhar, and Nawaf al-Hazmi checked into the Marriott Residence Inn in Herndon, Virginia, near Washington Dulles International Airport. Salah ibn Abdul Rahman Hussein was staying at the same hotel that night. Hussein originally stayed at a nearby different hotel, but moved to this hotel on the same day the hijackers checked in. Hussein is interviewed by the FBI shortly after 9/11, but according to testimony from an FBI agent, this interview is cut short when Hussein mimics fainting and short of breath. At 7:15 a.m. on September 11, 2001, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Majid Makid checked in at American Airlines Ticket Center. Both had set off the metal detectors and were put through a secondary screening. The FAA has a computer system in place called CAPS, Computer Assisted Passenger Pre-Screening System. This identifies passengers who are most likely requiring additional scrutiny by airport security. CAPS selected both men. Makid's luggage is not loaded on Flight 77 until after his boarding is confirmed. Makid, however, continued to set off the alarm. He was searched by metal handheld alarm and wand. At this time, both of the al-Hazmi brothers checked in at American Airlines ticket counter at 7:29 a.m. Vaughn Alex, who was working at Dulles Airport at the time, remembers checking them in because they were arriving a little late. Here's a short interview by USA Today.
We saw 2 people come into the ticket counter, come into the terminal. The check-in did not go smoothly at first. At the time we were asking questions, did you pack your bag yourself? Has it been out of your possession? We got them checked in. I made them selectees because one did not have proper ID, the other couldn't answer the questions. And it wasn't until the next day that they were calling a bunch of us back to the airport. People weren't looking at me. It was really an odd thing. I said hello to people, and they were like, "They want you down in the general manager's office." I literally ran my hand down the manifest. There were 2 names, that popped out. It was two brothers, and I just looked, and I totally remembered the transaction at that point. I remembered everything, and it's just like a cliche. And I said, I did it, didn't I?
You know you did everything you were supposed to do, but still that guilt gnawed at you.
I was guilty. I had gotten these last two people on the airplane. People were saying, well, maybe you ought to talk to people. Maybe you ought to get into group therapy or something. How do you go to a group therapy where you're the one that caused it? You know, how do you sit with people that have lost family members and lost, you know, friends and coworkers and say, oh, you know, yeah, I was there that day and I put them on the aircraft. So for a long time, I just felt there was nowhere for me.
But you're doing a lot better now.
Absolutely. Went to work for Department of Homeland Security. I like thinking that in some small way I'm contributing.
Meanwhile, Honneger would be checked in at 7:35 a.m., but American Airlines would be unable to locate information confirming his check-in time according to the 9/11 Commission. Here is where we witness our second conspiracy regarding the Pentagon issue. A man dressed in black, short-sleeved black shirt, black pants, being checked in by security while his bags are being screened, comes into the scene immediately after the Al-Hazmi brothers are checked through security screening. At first, he will be confused as Honneger, but looks absolutely nothing like him. Here's a photo of him. Here's a photo of Honneger. Looks nothing like him. In 2006, the LA Times would post an article showing the man in black as Honneger. Even to this day, most media outlets address him as the individual in black. But if the man in the white shirt is Honneger, who is the man in black? And why was this individual not properly identified by the FBI or the 9/11 Commission? Nelson Martin's excellent documentary describing this in detail is called 677, which I'm going to link below in the description. I would recommend watching this and come to your own conclusions. The law firm of Motley Rice, which was the firm representing the families and victims of American Airlines 77, obtained a copy of the Dulles security checkpoint video and leaked it to the press one day before the 9/11 Commission report was released, along with the official video of the Dulles security camera. Now, some truthers like to state that the video, which isn't time-stamped, is false, that the video could have been taken at any time during the day, month, or year. However, this will be proven to be incorrect. The video obtained by Motley Rice has been exported without the timestamp showing. Now, this is sometimes done in cases where the timestamp obscures some of what was taking place and what you want to see, which was exactly the case in the 9/11 video. Here in this video clip I'm showing, you will see Al-Midar and Makka going through screening. Just ahead of them, you're going to notice a woman in a white shirt, gray dress, holding a red animal cargo holder. That woman is Marie Ray Sopper. She perished aboard Flight 77. And since Marie Ray Sopper is in the video, in the same vicinity of the 9/11 hijackers, the video is indeed authentic. Flight 77 had 58 passengers on board with a load factor of 188. However, on Tuesdays, they were considered the least traveled day of the week, with the same load factor seen on Tuesdays in the previous 3 months for Flight 77. At 8:15 a.m., Flight 77 began departing from Gate D26 and onto runway 30. At 8:20 a.m., it took flight out of Dulles. The FAA kept in constant contact with American Airlines 77 pilot Charles Burlingame as they took off. I'm going to link below the ATC recording from Indianapolis Air Route Traffic Control Center to Flight 77 in the descriptions below. At 8:51 a.m., Flight 77 was hijacked. The last radio communication ATC had with anyone for Flight 77 was at 8:50 a.m. Just shortly after Flight 77 and 175 were also hijacked. Now, there were no reports of stabbings or bomb threats, and the pilots were shoved back to the back of the plane with the passengers. At 8:56 a.m., the plane's transponder was turned off, and the hijackers set the flight's autopilot on. Indianapolis ATC and American Airlines dispatchers made several attempts to contact American Airlines 77, but to no avail. At 9:12 a.m., flight attendant Renee May contacts her mother, Nancy May, using a CTE airphone. The call would only last 2 minutes. Previously, she tried American Airlines Center, but the lines were congested. However, she calls her mother and she states that the hijackers were moved the people to the rear of the plane. Now, she also explains that they were hijacked by 6 individuals. She ends her call telling her mother to call American Airlines to report the hijacking. She gives her mother 3 numbers to call. The only other call, which is hotly contested by truthers, is pertaining to Barbara Olson. Here's a little rundown. Lori Lynn Keaton, who was a Department of Justice secretary working in Ted Olson's office on the morning of September 11th. At approximately 9 a.m., she received a series of approximately 6 to 8 collect telephone calls, in which only 2 connected. Each of the calls was an automated collect call, except for one. There was a recording advising of the collect call and requesting she hold for an operator. And a short time later, another recorded stating that all operators were busy. Please hang up and try your call later. Keaton then received a collect call from a live operator. The operator advised that there was an emergency collect call from Barbara Olson to Ted Olson. Keaton advised that she would accept the call, and Barbara Olson was put through and sounded completely hysterical. Barbara Olson also said, "Can you tell Ted?" Cut off. Keaton cut her off and said, "I'll put him on the line." There was a second telephone call approximately 5 minutes later, and this time Barbara Olson was online and she answered. It was, by the way, it was direct. It was not a direct call. Barbara Olson said, "It's Barbara," and Keaton interrupted and said, "He's on the phone with you, with the command center. I'll put you through." This next bit of information from Keaton is important. Now, Keaton advised that there was no caller identification feature on the phone she was using, so Keaton didn't know if Barbara Olson was calling from the phone on the plane or from a cell phone. With Barbara's call to her husband, Ted Olson, she didn't say anything to describe the hijackers, but she did refer to them as they. She told them they had knives and box cutters, and she did not make any statements about the hijacker stabbing or slashing the passengers. It was a pretty mundane call. Now, her phone calls to Ted Olson is not nearly as much as revealing as what Renee May told her mother. Now, according to Renee May's call to her mother, there were 6 hijackers. According to the 9/11 Commission, there was only 5 hijackers. This would be the call that truthers would want to concentrate on, not Barbara Olson's. But why is that? At 9:29 a.m., while at an altitude of 7,000 feet, 30 miles from Ronald Reagan Airport, the autopilot and auto throttle was disengaged. During this time, Ronald Reagan Airport controllers asked a passing Air National Guard C-130 plane, which was piloted by Lieutenant Colonel Stephen O'Brien, to follow Flight 77. O'Brien told him he could view from his angle that the plane was a Boeing 757 with silver fuselage. He then stated he saw a fireball and assured the controllers the plane was downed. A short time later, he then contacts ATC controllers again to state the plane had hit the west side of the Pentagon. Here's a short 1-minute audio clip of O'Brien.
Okay, 080, go for 06.
Dallas, I'm keeping go for 06 with me for a while.
Thank you, RN.
Hogan, 5981, 180.
Hogan, 5981, thank you. Washington, I'll give you the out. It'll come here in a few minutes.
Washington, this is go for 06.
Go for 06, guys.
Yes, sir, that aircraft is down. He's in our 12 o'clock position. Looks like it's just to the northwest of the airfield at this time, sir.
Go for 86, thank you. Descend and maintain 2000.
Okay, we're down to 2000. This is Gopher 06. It looks like that aircraft crashed into the Pentagon, sir.
Gopher 86, Gopher 06, thank you.
Who's also called Gopher 06 and ATC. I will link below the entire audio of ATC and O'Brien in the descriptions. Flight 77 crashed into the west wall of the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m. and impacted the building while descending from 2,200 feet at a high rate of speed of 530 miles an hour while clipping 5 light poles in the process before the impact. It also sheared a tree line and a generator nearby the building. Now, Wayne Costi from the Truth Action Project, along with David Chandler of 911speakout.org, have constructed a marvelous 5-hour-long presentation detailing the Pentagon and Flight 77. In my estimation, it is by far and away the single best summarization of what happened at the Pentagon to date. I'll link below the presentation in the descriptions. Outline of the plane are as follows. A takeoff weight max of 89,900 pounds, cruise speed of 659 miles an hour or a 0.86 Mach, wingspan of 124 feet 10 inches, height of 44 feet 6 inches with a fuselage width of 12 feet 4 inches. The damage to the Pentagon and Flight 77 were extensive, readily seen at the ground level and even from the sky. There are 87 eyewitness accounts with reported seeing an American Airlines plane before impact and after it. There are well over 125 people who witnessed a plane crash into the Pentagon and or heard an explosion after seeing the plane in the air. The front part of the fuselage disintegrated on impact, while the mid and tail sections moved for a fraction of a second, with the tail section penetrating furthermost into the building. The plane hit the Pentagon at the first floor level, and at the moment of impact, the airplane rolled slightly to its left, with the right wing elevated. Now, Flight 77 took about 0.8 of a second to fully penetrate 310 feet into the 3 outermost of the building's 5 rings. Debris was found mostly inside the building. Some noticeable pieces were also seen outside the building as well. According to the ASCE Pentagon Building Performance Report, there were 2 holes visible in the Pentagon immediately after the impact. A 75-foot wide entry hole in the building's exterior wall and a 12-foot wide hole in Ring C. The Pentagon's middle ring, which was from the landing gear going to the wall and not the fuselage. Now, the falsehood created by Theory Mason and echoed by Loose Change claims that the second-story hole made by the plane's top was the entry point seen here. But this is, of course, highly disingenuous from Loose Change. The water and foam spray, which are covered in the extensive damage which is shown here, this is the actual in-point hole made from the plane's impact. Quite a difference. As for the redesigned walls and windows regarding the Pentagon, here's a short summary of how they were designed. The renovation program architect engineer for Wedge 1, which was Hayes, Shawn, Matern, and Matern Incorporated, or in short HSMM, worked closely with the Productive Design Center in assessing the blast resistance of the existing walls and the proposed replacement. During the preliminary evaluation, the engineers studied the outermost E-ring walls and the innermost A-ring walls. The resulting data helped formulate initial cost analysis for reinforcing outer ring walls and provided a foundation for the final design. HSMM designed a practical floor-ceiling connection scheme for the vertical tubes. The tubes must withstand large deflections to perform their intended function of absorbing blast loads. Large deflections, however, with their inherent shear, created significant tensible force on connecting hardware in a blast situation. This condition eliminated the more direct top-to-bottom approach of connecting the vertical tubes to the concrete slab above and below with expansion anchors. Nearly 8,000 windows in the Pentagon will be replaced with fixed double pane glass mirroring the original architecture, but offering improved thermal and ultraviolet filtering properties. The Productive Design Center employs an extremely tough mesh exotile material, normally used to stabilize highway embankments, to arrest the wall debris loosed by the blast. For the proposed solution, the fabric ends were wrapped around steel plates, which are then bolted to the sill tube and to the support plate at the floor slab below the window. As you can see from this picture, the blast windows that survived the plane's impact were designed exactly as outlined by HSMM. Again, I refer to Wayne Costi and Dave Chandler's excellent presentation regarding the construction of the Pentagon, which explains in full about the design of the Pentagon in Chapter 4 of their presentation, which I'm going to link below in the descriptions. I'm also going to add Ryan Dawson's video titled "A Plane Hit the Pentagon," describing in full detail about the harmful effects of spreading disinformation, which is currently going on in the truth movement, and his presentation regarding Flight 77's impact into the Pentagon. Dawson was one of the very first researchers who credited a plane impacting the Pentagon, which is unfortunate only because of the complete saturation of falsehoods promoted by people which I mentioned previously. The responders on the scene were the Arlington Fire Department. Arlington Fire Department is only 2.9 miles from the Pentagon. Jason Schwartz, the assistant fire chief from Arlington County, took command in operations immediately. I'm going to link below a lecture given by Jason Schwartz regarding the operations at the Pentagon. In a short while later, Battalion Chief from Arlington County, Robert Cornwell, would join him in assisting the Pentagon operation. Mark Skipper Alan Wallace from the Fort Myer Fire Department pulled foam truck 161 out of the Pentagon firehouse and parked it on the Pentagon helipad in preparation for George Bush's planned arrival later in the day. Alan Wallace stated that he heard the 757 engine screaming towards him. At the very same time hearing this, he saw the plane's rapid descent towards him and the building. According to Wallace, as soon as he saw the plane, they were involved in an explosion of sound, fire, and heat. And before that, he ducked under a van parked beside the fire station. Skipper estimated that they were perhaps 200 feet from the point of impact. While they were under the van, Wallace didn't stay there for long because it was even hotter under the van. Wallace realized he needed to move the fire truck, which was Foam 161, away from the burning building if it was going to have any impact on the subsequent firefighting. He jumped out of the truck and started the engine. He jumped into the truck and started the engine, unaware that the rear of the truck was already engulfed in flames, rendering the truck inoperable. Lieutenant Colonel Brian Bairdwell was in an office with his two colleagues watching live footage of the Twin Towers burning. At 9:35 a.m., he stepped out to go to the bathroom, telling his co-workers he would shortly return. And approximately 10 minutes after he stepped out of the bathroom, American Airlines Flight 77 barreled into the side of the building. The nose of the aircraft was less than 20 yards from where Bairdwell stood, and fortunately for Bairdwell, he was rescued, but 60% of his body was burned terribly. Omar Campo, who was cutting grass on the other side of the road when the airplane flew over his head, he later recalled, quote, "I was cutting the grass and it came in screaming over my head. I felt the impact. The whole ground shook and the whole area was full of fire. I could never imagine I would see anything like that here." End quote. Afe Work Hagos, who was on I-84 in a traffic jam, quote, "There was a huge screaming noise and I got out of the car as the plane came over. Everybody was running away in different directions. It was tilting its wings up and down like it was trying to balance. It hit some lampposts on the way in." End quote. Gary Bauer, a former presidential candidate on his way to the Capitol, describes his testimony. Quote, "We looked out the front of the windows to see the plane, but it wasn't until a few seconds later that we realized the jet was coming up from behind us on the major highway, and it veered right into the Pentagon. The blast literally rocked all of our cars. End quote. Terrence Keene, who lived nearby the Pentagon in a 14-story building, quote, I saw this very, very large passenger jet. It just plowed right into the side of the Pentagon. The nose penetrated right into the portico, end quote. There are dozens upon dozens of eyewitness accounts who testified to seeing a plane impacting the building. Not a hologram or a missile or a flyover, but the plane impacting the Pentagon. I'm going to provide a listing of eyewitnesses below in the description. Now, other first responders who arrived on the scene to help assist in the rescue and recovery operations were Fort Myer Fire Department, Arlington County Fire Department, Ronald Reagan Airport Fire Department, District of Columbia Fire Department, the Virginia Medical Technician Team, Fairfax and Montgomery County Search and Rescue, Fort Belvoir Transportation Division, Fort Belvoir Fire Department, Urban Search and Rescue from Fairfax and Montgomery counties, and FEMA. Numerous pieces of the plane were witnessed by dozens and dozens of first responders on the day of 9/11 and in the ensuing days later. Navy Command Center Lieutenant Colonel Shaper, in his search and rescue of the building, noticed a chunk of the aircraft's nose and landing gear in the service road located in the B and C rings. On September 14th, Fairfax Urban Search and Rescue Virginia Task Force 1 Carlton Berkhammer and Brian Morovitz observed an intact seat from the cockpit. Also on September 14th at 3:40 a.m., the flight data recorder box for Flight 77 was recovered by an Arlington County Fire Department member and a paramedic from Arlington County. Dick Bridges, the deputy manager from Arlington Fire Department, said they found the boxes right where the plane entered the building under piles of burnt debris. According to Navy photographer Kevin Ribrod, he remarked that there were so many charred bodies, he almost stepped on many of them throughout the first floor. The human remains recovered from the Pentagon were turned over to the Armed Forces Medical Examiner Office in Dover Air Force Base. The medical examiner there was only able to identify 185 out of the 189 bodies. 4 of the bodies were disintegrated. By October 2nd, 2001, the rescue and recovery operations were complete, turned over to Pentagon officials. The evidence was used to prosecute Zacharias Moussaoui in his trial, which took place in 2006, and I'm going to link below the prosecution trial exhibit below in the description area. Two security videos, which were frame-by-frame videos, released from a December 2004 Freedom of Information Act request by Judicial Watch on behalf of Scott Bingham. Both of the Pentagon surveillance cameras were in a security checkpoint located about 833 feet north of the Pentagon impact point. According to some truthers, there were 86 cameras which had captured the Pentagon impact. This, however, is untrue. All of the videos collected on 9/11 weren't even from the same state, no less. Some videos collected from buildings such as the Citgo gas station, Doubletree Hotel, near the Pentagon, did not have cameras pointed toward the Pentagon. Why would they? In 2005, an FOAI request for the 86 videos from 9/11 were requested by FBI Special Agent Jacqueline McGuire. She responded to they responded to the request suggesting there were 86 tapes collected by the FBI and processed in their headquarters in Quantico, Virginia. Under the McGuire Declaration, the tapes were revealed. Some even can be found on YouTube. However, 56 of these videotapes did not show either the Pentagon building, the Pentagon crash site, or the impact of Flight 77 into the Pentagon. Of the remaining 29 videotapes, 16 did not show the Pentagon crash site and did not show the impact of Flight 77 into the Pentagon. Of the 13 remaining tapes, only 12 showed the Pentagon after the impact of Flight 77. Thus, only 2 videos showed the Pentagon impact, the Pentagon's own security camera footage that would later be released. One of those 2 recordings seemed to only show the fin of the plane due to a foreground obstruction. The other recording seems to show the entire plane, but at very low resolution. I'm going to provide the McGuire Declaration in the description box. Truthers who claimed the security camera's timestamp at 9:12 suspicious that the video was altered. However, this is untrue. On November 9, 2006, the Office of the Security of Defense, in which Diane Putney interviewed Brian Austin and Steve Pennington, DRS Radiant Technologies Corporation employees. Both have worked on and with Pentagon surveillance cameras. Pennington extracted those frames on 9/12/2001 as requested by FBI officials. According to the incorrect time and date on the video, Pennington said in an interview with Putney, quote, "Unfortunately, the software had a bug in it, and when a still image was saved, it captured the time in the computer at the time you were capturing the image or saving the image from the video to become a still picture. That bug has long since been corrected, and that is the reason that the time and date are wrong," end quote. I'm going to link the interview in the description box. So what can we ascertain what happened at the Pentagon, according to the information listed here? Well, it's quite evident, really. American Airlines Flight 77 took off from Dulles Airport, which was then hijacked and crashed into the Pentagon. Notable 9/11 truth seekers such as David Chandler, Wayne Costi, and Chris Jenkins, who were lauded by their fellow constituents in the truth movement and have defended this position, have now been labeled as traitors to the 9/11 truth movement itself for simply showing that a Boeing 757 airliner crashed into the Pentagon. Wayne Costi has been banned by his fellow constituents during the 9/11 Deep State teleconference, which was instigated by Craig McKee and Barbara Honneger. David Chandler is currently being railroaded by truthers such as Craig McKee and the CIT Team and other menial echo chamber-laden gangs, which was once the truth movement but are nothing more than potshot artists who talk a big game but come up empty when challenged on their transparent position regarding the Pentagon. I'm a skeptic, and I don't adhere to the government narrative, nor do I consider myself part of any debunker, truther camp. There are very few like us who are individuals and who don't assimilate to groupthink, people like Ryan Dawson, Nelson Martins, Ed Brotherton, Wesley Norris. We don't have any preconceived agendas regarding 9/11, and we don't make our findings based upon our preconceived notions. More importantly, if you're just simply believing what I say during this presentation, I would find that quite disconcerting. I would like for you, the viewer, to take everything I say and carefully research it yourself and see if the factual information is verifiable or not. It's how I learned, and I will continue to do so.
With the familiar red, white, and blue paint across the windows of an American Airlines jetliner, it did not veer off course, it did not change direction, it went directly into the wall. There was a great explosion and just fire, just bright white and yellow fire.
Joel Zuckerman was just one of hundreds of eyewitnesses to the impact of Flight 77.
I saw pieces of scrap metal, you know, maybe long pieces, a couple of yards long, but not huge chunks of an airplane. I mean, everything went right to that wall and just seemed to be consumed into the wall.
21, Route 1 to Florida, Davis has approved the out.
John O'Keefe is a legal journalist. He was also stuck in traffic outside the Pentagon that morning and is convinced he too saw a plane, not a missile.
All of a sudden, out of the left side of my view came this giant American Airlines plane. There was no mistaking what type of plane it was. It was a silver jet with American Airlines plastered on the side, and it looked like a plane coming in for a landing, except that it was going in the wrong direction. It wasn't headed towards the airport. It was too low. It was out of place. It took a few moments before it sort of registered where it was heading. Right towards the Pentagon. The next thing I knew, it was a giant explosion, a huge orange ball of fire